Hi, everyone, and welcome to Making the Grade. I'm Michelle Edmonds from Idaho News 6. It is so good to have you with us on this a little bit later Tuesday morning. And the reason we're meeting a little bit later is because my partner in crime, Kevin Richert from Idaho Education News, has been very busy watching virtually, I believe, right, JFAC budget hearings. But these are important, Kevin, because fact of the matter is that it is Education Week at the Idaho Statehouse. And if people have joined us for Making the Grade, they know that this is the week where the money hits the pockets, so to speak. So tell us a little bit about overall why Education Week is so important at the Idaho Statehouse.
Well, it's the first time that we'll see legislators really start to look at the budget requests for K-12 and for higher education. So it started Monday with University of Idaho making its budget pitch. We had Lewis Clark State College and Idaho State University up today. The budget committee will hear from the community colleges later this week. They will hear from Boise State University on Friday. And then sandwiched in between all of that, State Superintendent Sherry Ibarra will be there on Thursday explaining her budget request for K-12. So it's a full week of budget hearings in the committee. No decisions will come yet. The committee will get back together after all of these budget presentations, after they hear from every state agency over the next several weeks. The budget committee will start to do some budget writing in the latter part of February. So it's going to be a few weeks before we see what these budgets look like for K-12, for higher education, how it compares to what Governor Little has recommended, how it compares with some of the ideas that Superintendent Ibarra has in K-12. So it's early, but this is an important step in that process.
If you could give a flyover view of what's happening so far, what you've heard so far over these last couple of days, is there a theme that's emerged?
Oh, yeah. I think what you're hearing from the university presidents and the college presidents so far is they've made cuts. They've heard the call from legislators who wanted the universities and the colleges to look at their spending and look at ways to control spending or rein in spending, but that they've made cuts and that they're getting to a point where they can't cut much more. What Lewis Clark President Cynthia Pemberton said today is, look, we're in the people business and we're going to have to start to reinvest in people. So you're hearing kind of you're hearing a dual message from the presidents. They're saying, look, we've made cuts. Here are where we've made cuts. Here's where we're trying to prioritize funding. But, you're hearing them say that it's time to put a little bit of money back into higher education.
We're seeing a picture there. This is coming off of course, the Idaho ednews.org website of State Board of Education President Debbie Critchfield as she presented as well. My takeaway there, Kevin, was that as she was talking about, and again, so people understand, the State Board of Education in Idaho controls not only the K through 12 system, but they have their hands completely in the college system as well. And her point, my takeaway from her was, man, they've just tried to keep school doors open.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you heard that message loud and clear on Monday from Debbie Critchfield of the State Board, and also from University of Idaho President Scott Green. Both said, look, the priority was to try to keep the doors open, to try to maintain face-to-face learning. As Critchfield put it, that was the goal, and we built everything around that. And Scott Green from the University of Idaho was saying, our goal was to stay open, and we had to do a lot of hard work to get there. And I'm sure you would hear that from every college and university president. It's testing, it's contact tracing, it's trying to identify cases and outbreaks before they get too far out of control. And they got through the fall, and now they have to start to do that again in the spring. So just staying open. I think you're hearing from Debbie Critchfield and Scott Green a message of, let's take a step back and note that it wasn't easy to keep open. It wasn't easy to have open campuses this fall. So a little bit of let's mark what we managed to get accomplished here this past semester.
When we talk about the colleges freezing tuition, That's something that's got to be on the minds of not only college students, but parents as well. And they want to know where that's going. What was presented before JFAC when it came to freezing tuition rates yet again?
Well, Kevin Satterley, the president of Idaho State University, when he was up this morning, he again made the link between freezing tuition and passing the governor's budget recommendation. He has said that if the governor's budget is approved, he believes that Idaho State can freeze tuition for a second consecutive year. U of I has made a similar pledge. Boise State has made a similar pledge. Now, I think it's worth noting, though, too, that Lewis Clark State College has said, we're going to have to raise tuition. We're at a point where we're just not sustainable. And we have to, again, put money into reinvesting in staff. So, and it remains to be seen. How will this budget committee look at this pledge from the university presidents? There's already been some backlash. The Idaho Freedom Foundation has taken the presidents to task, saying, it's arrogant of the presidents to try to bargain like this with the legislature. And, the Freedom Foundation has a number of legislators, especially in the House, who align with their values and their beliefs on almost anything. So I think it's going to be a tough go in the House to get a higher education budget through, but I've been saying that all along.
You were mentioning the governor and his budget. He definitely made a push to put more money into higher education and the K through 12 budget, and actually has a higher percentage increase for K through 12 than even the public school superintendent, Sherry Ibarra. Do you expect to hear something different from her when she presents on Thursday?
Well, this isn't the first time we've seen this. We've seen Superintendent Ibarra come in lower with a budget request than the governor has come in with. I think this goes back even to Butch Otter's time as governor. I believe this happened at least on one occasion. I'll be really curious to see what Superintendent Ibarra has to say about, education in this pandemic, education kind of pivoting out of the pandemic, if we're starting to get on the other side of the pandemic. It's going to be a very interesting message from her.
On that note, let's take a quick look at where coronavirus cases are as of the last couple of weeks. Idaho Education News has done an excellent job of tracking cases in not only the K-12 system, but also on college campuses. And Kevin, there are bright spots here, as we would hope, now that the vaccine has at least started to roll out to teachers. So what are you seeing in the K-12 system?
Well, what we're seeing in K-12, and you're right, it is hopeful. We're seeing fewer case numbers coming out of the K-12 system now for the past couple of weeks. And what I find significant about that is the timing. Here we are, we're a couple of weeks into classes resuming. So we're a couple of weeks removed from the first day of school post-holidays, and we're now several weeks removed from the holiday season in general. We were expecting to see surges in cases, maybe not even just in the K-12 system, but maybe all across the state as a result of the holidays, as a result of holiday travel, as a result of holiday gatherings. So what we're seeing with the overall case numbers and with the K-12 numbers, we're seeing some declines in those new case numbers. So that is an encouraging trend, and we'll just have to kind of watch and see how that is playing out. What I find significant about it, though, and you mentioned the vaccine, I would have a hard time thinking that this really has anything to do yet with the vaccine, just because the rollout of the vaccine is really in its infancy. I mean, I looked at those numbers again this morning. Those are posted every morning. Less than 1% of the state's overall population has received the 2 doses of the vaccine that you need to be fully vaccinated. And I would venture to guess that they're probably, the teachers who were just starting to get the vaccine last week have not been able to get the second vaccine, obviously. So I think we're so early in the vaccination process that something else is happening here that would account for the case numbers slowing down. So I don't know if we've really seen the benefit yet that you would expect to see as teachers begin to get vaccinated. I mean, We reported last week, Clark Corbin had a terrific story last week about the vaccination process in the schools and teachers getting vaccinated. Really interesting and powerful personal stories where teachers talked about their decision to get vaccinated, their excitement about being able to get vaccinated. What he reported then, and we'll never have really complete hard figures, but what we were able to figure out is that as of the end of last week, at least 1,400 teachers and school employees had been vaccinated. But that vaccination for schools had just begun in mid-January. So we're really early on in the process there. But you would expect and hope that as more teachers are vaccinated and as more teachers come back for that second round of vaccine, and that vaccine has some time to work into the system, that you'll see some benefit, maybe a few weeks down the road, that may become a factor in these case numbers in the schools.
Well, and we should point out as well that we will probably never know any accurate numbers about how many people are vaccinated in terms of the teacher population or school staff population, because, HIPAA laws, right?
Exactly.
Nothing has to be reported.
Yeah, and I think that all we can really do is sort of try to figure out, just based on the vaccine rollout, what might be happening with some of these populations. I go back to in December when the state started the vaccine rollout. They started with healthcare employees and long-term residents in long-term care facilities. Those were the two areas that had first dibs on the vaccine. And when that started in December, the word from Health and Welfare was that it might be a while before they were done with those populations and could start with K-12 staff. So we were hearing for a while there that it might not be until early February that teachers and K-12 staff could begin to get the vaccine. Well, the state was able to move that timetable up considerably. They were able to start vaccinating K-12 employees in mid-January. So what does that mean? Does that mean that there were maybe higher opt-out rates in the healthcare sector, higher opt-out rates in the long-term care facilities, maybe than Health and Welfare was expecting? That's a possibility. I think that's a definite possibility. So what happens from here? We were right in the middle of this wave of K-12 employees, first responders. They're the ones who are right now able to get the vaccine. And we know that sometime really in the next few days, probably in early February, the state is going to open up that process to residents over the age of 65. And we know there are a lot of them. I think Boise State Public Radio reported the other day that it's about 300,000 Idaho residents over the age of 65. So you'll have this big wave of older Idahoans who get their chance to get the vaccine. And how long will it take to work through those numbers of potential vaccine recipients? We'll see.
So let's combine these two now, Kevin, and talk about Education Week at the Statehouse, teachers getting vaccinated, Governor Little and his fight against lawmakers right now, very public fight as he's taken it to them, and the fact that there are many lawmakers who would like to see certain parts of his emergency mandate gone, that they would like rollbacks when it comes to certain portions of what the governor has tried to do in managing the pandemic. And now he's pushing back, saying that this could hurt vaccine rollout. All of this is a political hot mess to begin with, and now it's gotten even hotter.
It really has. And, I don't mean to snicker about it, but it is a very complicated and very bitter debate that's going on here. It's on one level, it's a debate over authority and separation of power. How much authority does the governor have in the middle of this public health crisis? How much authority does the legislature have in the middle of this crisis? And how do those two branches of government interrelate? I did an in-depth story looking at that last week. I was proud to be able to link to a Schoolhouse Rock segment in that story and do it honestly, because it really is. This is separation of powers. This is stuff we learned about in high school civics class, but we're seeing it in real time and with real implications. We have legislators upset with the governor because he has imposed limits on how many spectators can attend a high school basketball game. I mean, that's something we can all relate to. Now, it becomes it resonates with people in a very different way right now. So you've got the separation of powers debate, and you're right, the governor pushed back hard against legislators on Friday and said that if the legislature insists upon getting rid of the state's emergency declaration, it could jeopardize millions of dollars of federal aid. It could jeopardize the vaccine rollout that he and other state leaders are really pinning their hopes on, that if we can get a vaccine rolled out to a sufficient segment of the population, we can actually get the coronavirus under control and get it in check. So you've got that going on. But I think you've also just got a very fundamental difference of opinion about the severity of this pandemic right now. You had Heather Scott, one of the most conservative members of the House, on the floor yesterday, Monday, during the debate over the governor's limitations on gatherings, including high school sporting events. Heather Scott on the House floor saying the pandemic is over. Well, I look at the numbers that we get from health and welfare, and it doesn't look like it's over. And we're seeing some improvement in some of these numbers, but we're still seeing, more than 1,600 people have died of COVID-19 in the state of Idaho. We're still seeing new case numbers. We don't know what's going to happen down the road with some of these new strains and whether that's going to have an effect on case numbers and the severity of outbreaks. We do know that the vaccines are rolling out, but we do know that that's going to take some time. It doesn't feel over to the governor. I don't think it feels over to a lot of folks in state government, in the governor's inner circle, in within the Department of Health and Welfare. So you've got it's a process debate, but I think it's also just a debate about perception, about where we are at this point in relation to the pandemic.
This will become what defines this legislative season, don't you believe? Is this fight and the outcomes of this fight?
Yes. I called it the defining issue of the session last week, and then Friday happened. So I'm convinced that this will be the hot topic of the session, because we've got multiple pieces of legislation dealing with various aspects of the coronavirus response. And the debate is just going to continue. I believe the Senate is supposed to take up an emergency declaration piece of legislation, perhaps as early as Wednesday. I think Betsy Russell from the Idaho Press reported that. We're just getting started, and I think this is something that is far from resolved, and very strong opinions on both sides. And I think now you're starting to get to where it's becoming a little bit of a personal debate. It's something we're going to be watching very closely.
And of course, if you'd like to read much more about this, you can go to idahoednews.org. We're scrolling through right there. And even the governor himself has written a piece that is there trying to push his message. Kevin, I want to circle back around to a couple of comments and thoughts that people have for us. We love getting your questions and your comments in, and we've had a couple regarding vaccines and children specifically. Melissa's asking, will children have to get the COVID vaccine to go back to school? Somebody else was talking about going back to school next fall. Once again, I think we should highlight what Idaho's policy is on any vaccine right now, which is that there is an opt-out policy. So there could not be, unless put into law, a requirement of this, correct?
And I would find that to be very, very unlikely, because as you said, what the state has with vaccines, and here we're talking about vaccines that have been around for years, not new coronavirus vaccines, but vaccines that have been, available to parents and families for years and years. Your MMR vaccines, your vaccines, for diseases we've been fighting for years. Whether it's the mumps or rubella or whooping cough, whatever. Those are not required. A parent can opt out of a vaccine simply by filling out a form, and sometimes they don't even have to do that. They just have to turn in a note to the school saying we're opting our children out of the vaccine. And we see several thousand students in schools without vaccines because their parents have opted out of the vaccine. We have some of the highest opt-out rates in the nation. So that's our backdrop. That's our political history with vaccinations. New vaccines for the novel coronavirus that have not yet even been approved for kids at this point. No, I don't see mandatory COVID vaccines for students anytime soon. I could be wrong, but I just don't see anything that would suggest that that's going to happen.
I wanted to give people some background into what Idaho has done on other vaccines, because that will give you the background for what's going to happen come this fall. Valdi had a question, or maybe a statement is much more it, saying that you need to raise the teachers' pay. This goes back to the top of our Making the Grade when we were talking about budgets. And in the governor's budget for K-12, Kevin, he is talking about raising teacher pay with the career ladder, especially for veteran teachers. Is that what you expect to hear as well when State Superintendent Sherry Ibarra presents her budget on Thursday?
Oh, for sure. That's one area of agreement between the governor and the state superintendent. So I wouldn't expect any different sentiment from Superintendent Ibarra that we've heard from the governor.
And we should mention that in the past, even though there's been some debate around career ladder, most lawmakers have gotten on board realizing in order to keep teachers from leaving the state of Idaho or leaving the profession, they have needed to do something. And that's why this career ladder was implemented 5 years ago, 6 years ago. But here's my question for you, is in the hot political climate we're in, is it going to be as easy to get it passed this session?
I still think the prospects of getting another round of pay raises through this session, I think that's pretty good. I think the odds are pretty good. And the reason I say that is, as you mentioned, in the past, this has been very popular with legislators that have been on board with this idea. The other thing that makes it likely, in my view, that makes it politically doable, in my view, is the state is sitting on a huge budget surplus. I mean, we're looking at a $600 million budget surplus. Now, a lot of that is one-time money, but at this point, what the governor is asking for is about $45 million for this round of teacher pay raises. That fits within the budget that he laid out, and fits pretty comfortably within the budget that he laid out. So the money is there, and what we've seen in past years is that the political sentiment is there. So I think you put all of that together. If I were to make a wager right now, I think the raises get through.
Well, there is certainly no end in sight to what we're going to be talking about this legislative session. And again, how it all gets mixed up in the pandemic, in the surplus, and then you throw in education, which has always been at the forefront of this pandemic and what's happening. And Kevin, we've got ourselves what could be a longer session, I think. We always like to take bets on when's the session going to end. And at this point, my bet is it's going to go a little long.
Well, all Education Week really means on one level is that we're in the third week of the legislative session, and it's a session that's going to go on probably well into March, probably the latter part of March. Maybe the early part of April. It's hard to say. There's a lot that the legislature needs to work through, including the surplus, including this disagreement about emergency powers. Yeah, it's going to be a long session. I can't see them getting out of town early this year.
Well, if you'd like, again, to read about any of these stories, idahoednews.org is definitely the place to go. The whole team over there seems to have its eyes focused a little bit on the Statehouse this week with Education Week, and look forward to your reporting, Kevin, as you're checking out JFAC from afar, if you have to.
Yes, and we'll have coverage all week. So as I think we alluded to, I think the community colleges are up on Wednesday, so CWI and the other community colleges. Then we'll have Superintendent Ibarra on Thursday, and we'll have Boise State President Marlene Tromp presenting to JFAC on Friday. So we'll have full coverage each and every day this week. So, we're just kind of getting started here with Education Week, and it'll continue through Friday.
Well, we appreciate the excellent reporting, and thank you, Kevin, for being with us right here on Making the Grade today.
Thank you. Have a good week. Stay safe.